Hey there Hawkers, this team never seems to fail to tug on our heartstrings this season. We've had 3 nail-biting games in a row, this time falling just short of the power in the dying seconds of the game. After leading by as much as 41 points and 28 at the final break, we completely capitulated in the last quarter and gave Port a win they really did not deserve. There were plenty of positives to take out of that game though. As heartbreaking as it was, we need to look to the bright side of things with this young team and try to erase it from our memory. Before we jump into the review, we just need to go over some Hawthorn HQ medal votes for the game against the Saints last weekend. I couldn't upload due to being bedridden from COVID, and I also had some uni assessments due, so I just could not get around to it, unfortunately. One vote will go to Lloyd Meek. He beat Rowan Marshall in the hit-out count and finished on 46 for the game, as well as laying 12 disposals, 8 tackles, and 124 fantasy points, and topped it off with a goal. Marshall obviously still had a monster game around the ground, but I thought Meek beat him in most contests and allowed our mids to get first use of the footy more than Marshall did. 2 votes go to Jai Newcomb. He started off a little quietly, but as the game went on, he was a dominant force in the midfield. He finished with 31 disposals at 84% efficiency, had 8 clearances, 17 contested possessions, and did all of this going toe-to-toe with Jack Steele, who also had a very good game himself. The 3 votes will go to Carl Amon, who is proving himself as one of the best recruits around the league. Ever since coming over at the end of 2022, his precision kicking is something we have lacked ever since the post-3P era, and it's refreshing that we can trust him coming off of half-back or playing on the wings when he is needed there. He also finished with 31 disposals at 94% efficiency. He had 711 meters gained and even had 4 score involvements off of half-back. Now we will go straight into the round 10 review versus Port Adelaide. The first quarter was masterful footy and honestly the best quarter we have put together all year if you exclude that North game. We were winning it convincingly out of the middle and Port were not able to stop our kick mark game coming out of our defensive half. Hardwick got off the leash and kicked 4 of his 5 goals in the first term and Port could not contain us. In the second term, Port were able to wrestle back a little bit of the momentum, ultimately outscoring us for the quarter. It was a really tight tussle around the ground and neither team were able to transition the ball freely due to the immense pressure that both were applying. Port's superior midfield did help them generate a lot of their scores though. Our defense held up well enough with the amount of inside 50s that Port were generating, and most of the footy was being played in their forward half, which is a little bit of foreshadowing for what was to come. We jumped out the gates with a dominant performance at the start of the third. We were winning the clearances thanks to the work of Will Day and Newcomb. Unfortunately, we couldn't really capitalise on this dominance though, as we were quite inefficient with our entries and couldn't punish Port when it mattered most. We dominated when the ball was in contention, but once the ball was back in Port's hands, they looked really dangerous and we couldn't lock it in our front half enough to put a real gap on the scoreboard. As the quarter went on, it was clear that the boys were running out of gas and Port stole a couple of goals at the end to keep the margin to a manageable 28 points. In the wet, this margin should have been enough for us to hold on, but even with Hardwick being sent down back, Port were able to pile on goals through their pressure around the footy. Our defence did all they could, but thanks to a monster last quarter from Zach Butters, Port had all the answers and kicked the last 2 goals of the game in the last 30 seconds to steal a win which should have been ours. We did everything right all game up until that last quarter. Port were able to maintain a pressure gauge of 211 for the whole match, which is just insane. And credit to the boys for maintaining a gap on the scoreboard, but our inexperienced defense just could not cope with the constant inside 50s that Port were generating in that last quarter. When you have guys like Jai Sarong, who was just playing his 9th game, Seamus Mitchell, who was playing just his 20th, and obviously the debutant Ethan Phillips, it's a wonder that Port's dangerous forward line did not kick more goals for the game than they did, and it's a testament to the improvement we are seeing in this group over the past month of footy. We will unfortunately never know how this game would have gone down if we still had the services of Scrimshaw and Sicily. Perhaps we would have been able to defend out that last quarter more effectively, but I'm so proud of how the boys coped regardless. Frost and Phillips kept Dixon and Finlayson goalless, and Sarong was able to keep Marshall to just the 1. Additionally, our midfield competed with theirs all afternoon. We won the clearance count and matched their desire to win the footy with a pretty even stat in the contested possessions. Obviously, Butters and Horn Francis had monster games, but those guys are genuine A-graders. Will Day and Newcomb carried the midfield today, with Warple and Nash both being pretty quiet. Smalls had pretty disappointing afternoons, unfortunately. Ginnivan only kicked the one dribbler, while Moore and Wizard weren't able to extend their good form from the past couple of weeks. We won't fault them too much though. Port have one of the best defences in the league, and Deer was able to clunk a few marks. He was missing some pretty easy opportunities, but it's only his third game after all. I honestly thought Chol was able to impact the game pretty decently on his return to footy, having not played since the Sydney game, and it was very good to see him get some nice chase down tackles, kick a couple of goals on a formidable opponent in Alia. I think he played pretty solid. If you compare this game to the last time we played Port at the Adelaide Oval, it was just night and day. Yes, it would have been so satisfying to come away with the win, but let's not forget that in round 12 last year, they kicked 150 points on us, and this time we conceded basically half of that with an even less experienced defense. It's really easy as a supporter to only focus on the negatives, but as someone who was at the game, while we did dominate on the scoreboard for most of the game, it never truly seemed like Port were out of the game, and at the end of the day, they are a lot more experienced than us. They know how to turn those games around. Hopefully the heartbreaking loss doesn't affect the boys too much, and we can respond against another really good team in Brisbane at Marvel Stadium this weekend. If we can improve on that form and regain the services of Sicily and Scrimma, then it'll go a long way in stringing up some more wins together at this point in the season. We now have to go through the round 10 votes for the Hawthorn HQ medal. There were quite a few good performances this weekend, so let's see who deserved them the most. One vote goes to Lloyd Meek in back-to-back games. He dominated Dante Vicentini all afternoon and gave our midfield the platform to dominate for 3 quarters. He finished with a monster 45 hitouts and 18 disposals. It's good to see that he's backing up his good work over the past couple of months every single week. I really don't see how Ned Reeves is going to get back into this team with how well Meeky is playing. 2 votes go to Will Day, who tallies his first of the year after a little bit of a slow start since coming back from a foot injury. He was dominant in the midfield and finished with 27 disposals at 70% efficiency, had 534 metres gained, 13 contested possessions, 5 clearances, and kicked a goal of the year contender, evading 2 tackles with pure class and snapping it through across his body. And no surprises here, this man clearly loves playing at the Adelaide Oval. Blake Hardwick, with a bag of goals, sees him secure the 3 votes for the second time this season. He did kick 4 of his 5 in the first quarter, but he also put up some really good numbers around the ground, finishing with 23 disposals at 78% efficiency, took 6 marks and had 134 fantasy points. Fun fact, he's actually kicked more goals at the Adelaide Oval than Taylor Walker in 2024, and that's only from just the 2 games. A couple of honourable mentions to the players who had solid games but just didn't do quite enough to get some votes. Carl Amon, Massimo D'Ambrosio, Jai Newcomb and Cam McKenzie all played very good games in different ways and were very unlucky not to poll any votes. And now to recap the votes from the last couple of weeks, Amon jumps to equal second thanks to his best on ground performance against St Kilda. Likewise for Newcomb, who is steadily climbing the ladder after a very slow start to the season. Hardwick jumps into the top 5 with another 3 voter at Adelaide Oval. Lloyd Meek leapfrogs a bunch of players with 3 votes to sit just outside the top 5 after a string of dominant performances in the ruck. And finally, Will Day gets on the board for the first time this season and should continue to do so. I wouldn't be surprised if in a few weeks he is towards the top of the tally. Anyway, that's all for this review, Hawkers. I'd love to dive a little bit deeper into how we lost this game of footy, but I kind of just want to erase this one from my memory, to be honest. I'm just looking forward to the next 2 weeks of footy, which should both be winnable games if our recent form is anything to go off. We are playing some very good footy at the moment and definitely better than bottom 4 quality footy, that's for sure. It looks like us and West Coast will be contending for the most improved team this season, and our game against them at Optus Stadium should be juicy, but that is still a few weeks away. Hopefully we can get a couple of more wins on the board before then. Hope you all have a great week, everyone. Peace out. Don't forget to drop a like and subscribe if you do enjoy the video and want more Hawks content every week. See ya.